Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Jury's World. Today I am going to explain you the chapter Memories of Childhood, chapter 8. This is from your supplementary book class 12 Vistas. Let's see, this is written by Zitkala Essa and Bama, two writers. This unit presents autobiographical episodes from the lives of two women from marginalized communities who look back on their childhood and reflect on their relationship with the mainstream culture. The first account is by an American Indian woman born in the late 19th centuries. The second is by a contemporary Tamil Dalit writer. Gertrude Simmons Bonin, born in 1876, was an extraordinarily talented and educated Native American woman who struggled and triumphed in a time when severe prejudice prevailed towards Native American culture and women. As a writer, she adopted the pen name Zitkala Sa and in 1900 began publishing articles criticizing life, Carly Indian school. Her works criticized dogma, and her life as a Native American woman was dedicated against the evils of oppression. Bama is the pen name of a Tamil Dalit woman from a Roman Catholic family. She has published three main works: an autobiography, Karukku, 1992, a novel, Sangati, 1994, and a collection of short stories, Kisumbukaranam, 1996. The following excerpt has been taken from Karukku. Karukku means palmer's leaves, which with their serrated edge on both sides are like double-edged swords. By Felicitas Pan, the Tamil word Karukku containing the word Karu, embryo or seed, also means freshness and newness. This unit represents autobiographical accounts from the lives of two women writers, and both of them belongs to the marginalized communities, and both the women look back on their childhood. The first account is by American Indian woman born in the late 19th century, and the second was by a contemporary Tamil Dalit writer. So let's see the two stories. The first one is The Cutting of My Long Hair. The first day in the land of apples was a bitter cold one, for the snow still covered the ground and the trees were bare. A large bell rang for breakfast. Its loud metallic voice crashed through the belfry overhead and into our sensitive ears. The annoying clatter of shoes on bare floors gave up no peace. The constant clash of harsh noises with an undercurrent of many voices murmuring an unknown tongue made a bedlam within which I was securely tied. And though my spirit tore itself in struggling for its lost freedom, all was useless. So, the first day in the land of apple was a bitter cold one. Actually, ground was covered with snow and trees were bare. The sound of the bell and clatter of shoes were annoying to the sensitive ears. People murmured in an unknown tongue, and the narrator's soul had lost her peace and freedom, but all was useless. A pale-faced woman with her white hair came up after us. We were placed in a line of girls who were marching into the dining room. These were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. The small girls wore sleeved aprons, and shingle hair. As I walked noiselessly in my soft moccasins, I felt like sinking to the floor, for my blanket had been stripped from my shoulders. I looked hard at the Indian girls who seemed not to care that they were even more modestly dressed than I in their tightly fitting clothes. While we marched in, the boys entered at the opposite side. The door watched for the three young brave who came in our party. I spied them in the rear ranks, looking and uncomfortable as I felt. A small bell was tapped, and each of the pupils drew a chair from under the table. Supposing that act meant they were to be seated, I pulled out mine and at once slipped into it from one side. But when I turned my head, I saw that I was the only one seated, and all the rest at our table remained standing. Just as I began to rise, looking slyly around to see how chairs were to be used, a second bell was sounded. All were seated at last, and I had to crawl back into my chair again. I heard a man's voice at one end of the hall, and I looked around to see him. But all the others hung their heads over their plates. As I glanced at the long scene of tables, I caught the eyes of a pale-faced woman upon me. Immediately I dropped my eyes, wondering why I was so keenly watched by the strange woman. The man ceased his mutterings, and then a third bell was tapped. Every one picked up his knife and fork and began eating. I began crying instead, for by this time I was afraid to venture anything more. So, a pale faced woman came up after them. The girls were marching into the dining room, and these were Indian girls in stiff shoes and closely clinging dresses. And the boys entered through the opposite door. She was feeling very uncomfortable actually. A small bell rang, and she pulled out her chairs and sat on it, but noticed that all others were standing. She felt confused. The second bell was sounded, all were seated at last, and she caught the eyes of a pale faced woman upon her. She was keenly watched by the strange woman. The third bell was sounded, every one picked up his knife and fork and began eating. But this eating by formula was not the hardest trial in that first day. Late in the morning, my friend Zudin gave me a terrible warning. Zudin knew a few words of English, and she had overheard the pale-faced woman talk about cutting our long, heavy hair. Our mothers had taught us that only unskilled warriors who were captured had their hair singled by the enemy. Among our people, short hair was worn by mourners and singled hair by crowds. We discussed our fate some moments, and when Jodin so said, "We have to submit because they are strong," I rebelled. "No, I will not submit. I will struggle first," I answered. I watched my chance, and when no one noticed, I disappeared. I crept up the stairs as quickly as I could in my squeaking shoes. My moccasins had been exchanged for shoes. Along the hall I passed without knowing whither I was going. Turning aside to an open door, I found a large room with three white beds in it. The windows were covered with dark green curtains, which made the room very dim. Thankful that no one was there, I directed my steps towards the corner farthest from the door. On my hands and knees, I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. So, see the picture how she is cuddling under the bed. So, I crawled under the bed and huddled myself in the dark corner. From my hiding place, I peered out. shuddering with fear whenever I heard footsteps nearby. Though in the hall, loud voices were calling my name, and I knew that even Zedwin was searching for me. I did not open my mouth to answer. Then the steps were quickened and the voices became excited. The sound came nearer and nearer. Women and girls entered the room. I held my breath and watched them open closed doors and peep behind large trunks. Someone threw up the curtains, and the room was filled with sudden light. What caused them to stop and look under the bed? I do not know. I remember being dragged out, though I resisted by kicking and scratching wildly. In spite of myself, I was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. I cried aloud, shaking my head all the while until I felt the cold blades of the scissors against my neck and heard them gnaw off one of my thick braids. Then I lost my spirit. Since the day I was taken from my mother, I had suffered extreme indignities. People had stared at me. I had been tossed about in the air like a wooden puppet, and now my long hair was singled with a crowds. In my anguish, I mourned for my mother, but no one came to comfort me. Not a soul reasoned quietly with me, as my own mother used to do, for now I was only one of many little animals driven by a herder. So, uh, late in the morning, what happened? The narrator's friend Jedwin gave her a terrible warning that she had overheard the pale-faced woman talked. They talk about cutting their long, heavy hair. Among her people, short hair was worn by mourners. Single hair was worn by cowards. Jedwin decided to submit, but the narrator rebelled. She decided not to submit but to struggle actually. Tis disappeared. She came in a large room with three white beds in it. She crawled under the bed and hid herself. She heard footsteps nearby. The steps were quickened and the voices grew louder. They looked under the bed. She was dragged out. She was carried downstairs and tied fast in a chair. She faced extreme indignities. Her long hair was strangled like a coward. No one came to comfort her. Now she was only one of many little animals driven by a herder. So, uh, in this story, in the cutting of my long hair, Bonnie describes how actually mercilessly her long and beautiful hair was forcibly cut, and she was dragged out. She cried and resisted by kicking and stretching wildly, and she was tied fast in a chair but didn't submit. No one came for her help, and not a soul consoled her actually. So this is the story about that American Indian woman. Let's see the another story. We too are human beings, Bama. When I was studying in the third class, I had not yet heard people speak openly of untouchability, but I had already seen, felt, and experienced and been humiliated by what it is. I was walking home from a school one day. An old bag hanging from my shoulder. I was sat actually it was actually possible to walk the distance in 10 minutes, but usually it would take me 30 minutes at the very least to reach home. It was take me from half an hour to dawdle along, watching all the fun and games that were going on, all the entertaining novelties and oddities is the streets, the shops and the bazaars. The perfuming monkey, the snake which the snake charmer kept in its box and displayed from time to time. The cyclist who had not got off his bike for 3 days and who kept pedaling as hard as he could from break of day. The rupees note that were pinned on to his shirt to spur him on, the spinning wheels, the Mariatta temple, the huge bell hanging there, the pongal offering being cooked in front of the temple, the dried fish stall by the statue of Gandhi, the sweet stall, the stall selling fried snacks, and all the other shops next to each other. The street light always demonstrating how it could change from blue to violet. The Narikuravam hunger gypsy with his wild lemur in cages, selling needles, clay bits, and instruments for cleaning out the ears. Oh, I could go on and on. Each thing would pull me to a standstill and not allow me to go any further. So, the narrator was in the third class and she had not yet heard people speak openly untouchability actually. But she has already seen, felt, and experienced and humiliated by what it is. The distance from her school to home could be covered in 10 minutes actually, but she took from half an hour to an hour to reach there. She watched all the fun and games that were going on, and she saw performing monkeys. She saw the snacks farmer displaying his snacks. The other attractions were the Mariattam temple, the Pongal celebrations, the statue of Gandhi, and the sweet and snack stalls. She could go on and on. Everything stopped her and attracted her attention actually. At times, people from various political parties would arrive, put up a stage, and harangue up through their mics. Then there might be a street play or a puppet show or a no magic, no miracle stunt performance. All this would happen from time to time, but also certainly there would be some entertainment of other going on. Even otherwise, there were the coffee clubs in the bazaar, the way each waiter cooled the coffee, lifting a tumbler high up and pouring its contents into a tumbler held in his other hand. Or the way some people sat in front uh, some people sat in front of the choose shop chopping up onion, their eyes turned elsewhere, so that they would not smart on the almond tree growing there and its full fruit, which was occasionally blown down by the wind. All these sights taken together would tear my legs and stop me from going home. And then, according to the season, there would be mango, cucumber, sugarcane, sweet potato, plum shots, gram, plum syrup, and plum fruit, govas, and jackfruit. Every day I would see people selling sweet and savory fried snacks, payasam, halva, boiled tamarind seeds, and iced lollies. So, the political parties actually and would arrive and they cried through their mics. Then there might be a street play or a puppet show or a stunt performance. Some entertainment or the other was always going on, and she would see people chopping onions and or almonds blown down by the wind. All these sights stopped her from going home. Then she would see people selling vegetables, fruits, and sweets. Gazing at all this, one day I came to my street, my bag slugs under my soldiers. At the opposite corner, though a threshing floor had been set up, the landlords watched the proceedings, seated on a piece of shaking spade over a stone ledge. My people were hard at work, driving cattle in pairs, round and round to tread out the grain from the straw. The animals were muzzled so that they would not help themselves to the straw. I stood for a while there, watching the fun. Just then an elder of our street came along for the direction of the bazaar. The manner in which he was walking along made me want to double up. I wanted to shriek with laughter at the sight of such a big man carrying a small packet in the fashion. I guess there was something like badai or green banana bhaji in the packet because the wrapping paper are stained with oil. He came along and holding out the packet by its string without touching it. I stood there thinking to myself, if he hold it like that, won't the package come undone or the badais fall out? The elder went straight up to the landlord, bowed low and extended the packet towards him, cupping the hand that held the string with his other hand. The landlord opened the parcel and began to eat and the badais. After I had watched all this, at last I went home. My elder brother was there. I told him the story in all its comic details. I fell about with laughter at the memory of a big man and an elder at that making such a game out of carrying the parcel. But Anna was not amused. Anna told me the man was not being funny when he carried the package like that. He said everybody believed that they were upper caste and therefore must not touch us. If they did, they would be polluted. That is why he had to carry the package by its string. So, uh, one day the narrator saw that a threshing floor and had been set up near her street. The landlord sat there watching the proceedings. Then an elder of their street came along from the bazaar. He was carrying a small packet and it contained something like badai or green banana bhaji. He came along holding out the packet by its string without touching it. The elder went straight to the landlord's. He bowed low and extended a packet towards him, and the landlord opened it and began to eat. And she went home and told the story in all its comic detail. She fell about with laughter, but Anna, means elder brother, was not amused. He told her that the man was not being funny and he was from a low caste and he could not touch the food packet. When I heard this, I did not want to laugh any more, and I felt terribly sad. How could they believe that it was disgusting if one of us held that package in his hands, even though the badai had been wrapped first in a banana leaf and then parceled in papers? I felt so provoked and angry that I wanted to touch those wretches badais myself straightway. Why should we have to fetch and carry for these people? I wondered. Such an important elder of ours goes meekly to the shops to fetch snacks and hands them over severely, powering and shrinking to this fellow who just sits there and stuffs them into his mouth. The thought of it infuriated me. How was it that this fellow thought so much of themselves because they had scraped 4 coins together? Did that mean they must lose all human feelings? But we too are human beings. Our people should never run these pretty errands for these fellows. We should work in their fields, take home our wages and leave it at that. My elder brother who was studying at a university had come home for the holidays. He would often go to the library in our neighboring village in order to borrow books. He was on his way home one day, walking along the banks of the irrigation tank. One of the landlord's men came up behind him. He thought my Anna looked unfamiliar, and so he asked, "Who are you, Appa? What is your name?" Anna told him his name. Immediately, the other man asked, "Thambi, on which street do you live?" The point of this was that if he knew on which street we live, he would know our caste too. Okay. Anna told me all these things and he added, because we are born into the community, we are never given any honor or dignity or respect. We are stripped of all that, but if we study and make progress, we can throw away these indignities. So, study with care, learn all you can, and if you are always ahead in your lessons, people will come to you of their own accord and attach themselves to you. Work hard and learn. The words that Anna spoke to me that day made a very deep impression on me, and I studied hard with all my breath and being, in a frenzy almost. As Anna had urged, I stood first in my class, and because of that, many people became my friends. So, this incident, what she has seen there, actually make them angry. When she heard it, she felt terribly sad actually. It was disgusting. She felt so much provoked and angry that she wanted to touch those badais herself straightway. She wondered why poor people showed respect and bowed before such cruel persons. The rich forget that others are also human beings. Education gives dignity and respect. Anna told the narrator that they were born in a community of low caste people, so they were never given any honor or dignity or respect. If they study and make progress, they can throw away these indignities. If they are actually learn, people will come to them of their own accord actually. And the words Anna spoke to her that day made a very deep impression on her. She studied hard and stood fast in her class, and many people became her friends. So, this second story, we too are human beings. Bama describes how actually Indian society is ridden with the evil of untouchability. Bama herself experienced it. She is upset by the inhuman attitude of the people belonging to the higher caste towards lower castes. So, these are the two stories of Memories of Childhood written by Jitkala Shah and Bama. Hope you have understood the story. If you like my videos, do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.